I wish this could be a short one. I really do, but it probably won't be. It baffles me why I have to do this one at all, because I really can't figure out any logical way at all in which Steve Holland is or ever was involved in this case in the first place. What the hell has he got to do with any of it? Nothing. That's what. Yes, it's true that the allegation was that his mother, who by the way is not him, got one of the KC letters, but he didn't get one of the KC letters. Yes, Steve Holland is her son, but so is Billy Bob Joe Bob Holland, his brother. And we don't see Billy Bob Joe Bob running to every single camera in sight. Steve Holland is simply not involved. He knows absolutely nothing about this. And yet, every single time there's any public interest in this case, we see his giant round face filling the screen. Why is that? Why does the press treat this uninvolved, completely clueless guy as if he's somehow an expert on this case? How the heck is he an expert on anything? So why do they bother with that Poussin? Well, because he's one of the kings of Tupelo. From my point of view, he's actually one of the untouchables. Although, quite frankly, I certainly wouldn't touch him, not even with a 10-foot pole. Or at least that's what he thinks of himself, a king. And he demands that others view him that same way. And that's fine. Politicians are always quite inflated, especially the we in government know what's best for you, types of people. But the pathetic thing to me is that in the social black hole of the world, which is Tupelo, people actually enable his delusions of grandeur, and they capitulate to him, and with extreme deference. And I say politicians for a reason. So at the time I met the guy in 2004, Steve Holland was a 30-year, maybe plus or minus a couple years, but I think it was 32 or so, incumbent in the House of Representatives, Democrat. He had made a huge scene in front of his buddies after I revealed, publicly by the way, at a public event, that he was the one behind the Medicaid debacle. He denied having anything at all to do with the bill on which he was the sole author. His name was at the top of it. He went all the way around the state blubbering against it, the bill that he wrote, and the press just let him until I came along. So that night he screamed and cussed and he threw a tantrum kind of like a petulant child. He did so in front of Jamie Franks and a bunch of others, literally threatening violence and actually saying, "Who the hell are you?" Meaning, who the hell are you to question me, the king? That's who we're dealing with here. Now, a brief aside, thing that some people have where they can kind of act docile to keep the peace, really meaning the ability to kiss the king's ass, that substitution of flattery in place of honesty, well, I don't have that gene. I lack that particular social grace. In Holland's mind, I was supposed to act like all the other Tupelites and just worship at his feet. But that's a big problem for him, though, because guess what? I'm not a Tupelite. I've met real leaders, real dictators. I've met the heads of supranational cartels and even the leadership of massive terrorist organizations. And Steve Holland is nowhere near that caliber. They all have kind of that same trait where they.
This call is from a federal prison.
They want to kind of pour on their particular brand of charm when they wish. But Holland has no desire to actually earn those accolades or this respect or the deference in which he demands. So what I can say about them is that they aren't media whores. Holland is. Holland is a big, desperate media whore. I want you to try to imagine this. Visualize this. Who is Steve Holland? He's really just a big, gay Homer Simpson. You got the picture? He's a big dolt with his volume turned all the way up, desperately seeking whatever is the most shocking thing to say. He craves and feeds on attention, being as crass as he can and getting away with it. That's kind of his, that's his shtick. I'd be ashamed to say the things that he says. It doesn't pass the Nana test. no gentleman. That guy is no gentleman at all. And I actually think that his kind of heavy redneck act is really just that. It's just an act. It is so severe sometimes. He pours it on so thick that it really becomes like a caricature. It becomes like a spoof on rednecks. It's very stereotypical. It comes across as contrived to me, which should be an insult, by the way, to real rednecks. Anyway, I say big gay Homer Simpson guy because he is. He's not big as in tall. I'm 5'11". He's shorter than me, but he weighs about 7 tons more. And he's going to try to tell you, as he did with GQ magazine, that somehow I was obsessed with him and I hated him. And that my entire political campaign was me comparing him to Boss Hogg. There's your 70s throwback right there. And attacking him. Now, let's look at that for a minute. I did dare to run against him for the House, District 4. And I did attack his record, 16. I did attack his record, and severely so, because he was deserving of it, because he was the incumbent. So of course I was on the offense. He was the incumbent, but that Boss Hogg claim is one of his many, many complete lies. There was no ad, there's no push card, there's no calendar, there's no op-ed in my newspaper that I owned. I could have written something like that. There was no speech, there's no forum at all, which was ever part of my political campaign, which contains the words Boss Hogg. Once again, his fat ass is lying. What I did call him a lot was, get this, Steve Holland, the liberal undertaker. And here's why. Number one, his name is Steve Holland. Two, he's a liberal. Even though I don't like or use the word liberal anymore, it's not accurate these days. I just use the word leftist. And number three, he's an undertaker. So my characterization of him then and now is and was still just spot on. His boisterousness, that loudness, is just compensatory. He wants people to see him as something more than the big gay Homer Simpson dolt that he actually is. In his mind, you must view the jester as a king. In 2013, I had ample opportunity to attack him personally. I was actually given information by a U.S. Senator and the supporting artwork, which would have damaged him severely. But I didn't pull the trigger on that. Even though I would have won, I didn't pull the trigger on that. Why not? Because Steve Holland had a family. His son, Howie, his daughter, Brittany, they didn't deserve that. They didn't seem to have inherited Steve Holland's quirks. As far as I know, they're good people. In part two of this, I'll follow up and bring it back around full circle. This is going to need a second part. Welcome to the Kings of Tupelo cast of characters. Who is Steve Holland? Part 2. Just a few moments ago in part 1, I was talking about Steve Holland, the liberal undertaker. That's what I used to call him, not Boss Hogg, because he's a liar, but Steve Holland, the liberal undertaker. That's what I called him. And when I said he's an undertaker, I actually mean his occupation. And I mean that literally. That's what he does for a living. But he couldn't stand that I was actually telling the public, the voters, let's be honest, the truth about the man, especially his record, kind of showing that the emperor, the king, or in this case, the undertaker, has no clothes. Until that point, I was the only one, so this guy hates me for it, and he can't let it go, for exposing him. Although the idea of an exposed Holland is a little gross. For example, the entire state of Mississippi back then really joined me in ridiculing and lampooning Steve Holland as the laughingstock that he is, a joke which no one can really take seriously. Literally, newspaper cartoonists all the way in Jackson, Mississippi, were regularly revealing a new Holland caricature, especially about the beef plant scheme. That was That was a scam that he and the Speaker of the House used to scam millions from the $65 million waste of taxpayers' trust, a misplaced trust, as I pointed out in speeches back then and in the pages of my own newspaper. It was so crooked, it was so corrupt that several people actually ended up going to prison for his scam. Magically, though, guess who wasn't prosecuted? Holland, the man behind the scheme. He somehow escaped justice. Because you know what? You don't prosecute kings. It was odd to me that the rest of the state was on my side then and kind of saw him for who he is, but the voters of that House district, in other words, the voters right around Tupelo, they didn't care. He literally bragged, no joke, he literally bragged that he would still get the vote even if he was filmed having sex with a bull moose on the steps of the Lee County Courthouse. Now, that's a direct quote from him, by the way, even quoted in the 2013 GQ magazine article. That means that the rest of the state really had no idea why the people of Tupelo could be so stupid as to keep re-electing that guy, and I thought it was odd, too. Odd, also, that an undertaker should even be in the legislative branch of government, but, like everything, things are only strange, things are only odd, until you look into it, until you get a good look under the hood, the details. Now remember, this is a district with a very hard 60-40 split in favor of the Democrat Party. Not even Haley Barbour, who was, a political hero, really, the most popular governor in all of Mississippi, not even he could break that split in that district. I thought, arrogantly so, that I could. That the district would, somehow just start magically voting based on reason and logic, because that's how my brain works. Why not everybody else's, But that's certainly not the reason and logic, not the case in Tupelo, not part of the decision-making process of those Tupelites, especially in those precincts. It really has only been very, very recently that, let's be honest, that black voters have gained the courage to kind of step off the Democrat plantation. Now they're wising up. They're not as easily manipulated by the notions.
This call is from a federal prison.
By the notions of racial tribalism, which is the Democrats' wedge in every election as far back as I can remember. But back then, in 2007, 2008, they weren't hearing about policy or logic or values or anything other than just a win for their team. Therefore, the only way to win in those massive precincts is to have a D by your name on the ballot. And until me, no one had ever challenged him on the ballot. It's easy to win over and over and over even when you're the only one. He'd never had an opponent, so he wasn't used to being politically exposed as I was doing in 2007. So he hated me for doing that. Still never let go. But when you look back at his crooked history, you can actually kind of see it. He is, in fact, a failed politician. He's lost more offices than he's won. This is the simple math of it. The first time he ran for the legislature, he lost. But it was only when he was the only one on the ballot, when there was no race, that you can win. Let me give you an example. He briefly bought a house in Tupelo proper, and he moved there from Plantersville, which is kind of a sub-rural of Tupelo, so that he could pretend that he was a Tupelo resident, and that way he could run for mayor. And then he did. Well, guess what? He lost in the primary. In 2008, he tried running for the House seat, the U.S. House seat that was vacated by Roger Wicker. Guess what? He lost in the primary. Eventually, Ricky Thompson, a black Democrat, he entered the House 16 race against Holland, and in the primary, Holland lost. He lost after Tupelo actually discovered Holland's disrespectful treatment of the dead, the entrusted dead, in his funeral home. Those kind of unthinkable deeds that were kind of revealed in that same 2013 GQ magazine article, where Holland asserted himself for no reason, just to insult me and lie about me. Again, he wasn't part of the story in 2013. He asserted himself into it, which revealed himself in the process, and then that's when he paid the price, and Ricky Thompson beat him in the primary. He recently tried to run for the county supervisor seat, and guess what? He lost. So it's important to notice that this big drunk gay Homer Simpson character, who was the laughingstock of all of Mississippi, loses in the primary. What that means is he's rejected by his own people. His own people. The only thing he's really known for at this point is his hatred of me, so of course he jumped at the chance to be on the Netflix TV screens, because that's what media whores do. Somewhere along the line, this guy was rejected by his wife, I guess, who left him for another woman. Not that I disparage her. I don't disparage her at all, actually. I kind of applaud her. I don't want to come across as homophobic or anything. In fact, I approve of gay marriage, as long as both chicks are hot. Seriously, lesbians, keep it up. I'm a huge fan of your work. But especially if you think your only other choice is somebody like Steve Holland, so I totally see it. Although it's really none of my business, but theirs was kind of a charade of a marriage anyway, whether she left him because of his alcoholism or his uncontrollable anger and temper tantrums or his proclivity and his constant craving for attention. Doesn't matter. Psychologically, what he's doing is simply compensating. He feels insignificant. He is. He feels irrelevant. He is. And instead of trying to actually do something meaningful and relevant, to actually earn some respect, put in the work, it's just easier for him to elevate himself by tearing down somebody else. Those who cannot do good do bad. The Netflix cameras have given him that platform, again, for some unknown reason. And he has no idea when he looks like a buffoon or looks sinister. He has absolutely no business in any of this story because he's not involved in it at all. Anyway, he's already told a multitude of straight-up lies about me, and he knows it. But he doesn't seem to think that I can hear it or can respond. And once again, he's wrong. So I hate to say it, Tupelo, but I told you so. Ironically, here's some irony for you. In the words of Kevin Curtis, you should have listened to me. Anyway, that's my 3 chords in the truth.